There's a lot of legendary effects in 76, and every now and then the list expands, so having to only focus on a few of them would definitely make your life as a player easier. So here's the only effects that you should ever need. Oh, and this is also a weapon focused list focusing on the primary legendary effects. Number 5, Executioners. Now to some that may be a bit of an unusual one to go for, but there's a lot of hidden beauty when it comes to Executioners, particularly more so in recent updates. 76 isn't a hard game, so generally most enemies are dying pretty quickly regardless of what build or weapon you're using, as long as it's slightly coherent. The only ones that stick around for any amount of time are your bosses and certain event legendary enemies. Now, legendary enemies recently got a change where they don't regenerate to full health anymore, they just have a lot more health and resistance. Executioners does 50% increased damage to enemies below 40% health. On paper, that may seem far worse than something like aristocrats or junkies or any of the other effects that give 50% increased damage, but what the explanation doesn't tell you is that Executioners is multiplicative, not additive. It's one of the few things in the game that still has a multiplicative modifier, and because of that, it can outpace other legendary effects when the enemy's health bar actually sticks around long enough, aka your bosses. So once Executioners gets going and stacks with other buffs, it's a very effective effect. It's also more versatile than others because it only relies on the enemy's health bar to activate, whereas other effects need more requirements to get going. You have your 50% increased legendary effects, which are only active against one enemy type, or junkies, which you need to keep up your addictions to get the full benefit, aristocrats, which requires a lot of caps, which is useless to any new players or players that haven't been around for a long time, or for any endgame players who like buying and collecting rare plans or apparel and usually keep lower cap amounts for the constant in and out nature of that system. So don't overlook Executioners, it'll pleasantly surprise you. Bloodied. Hard to make a list and not include Bloodied, because whether you hate or love Bloodied builds, it's a very strong effect. However, although it may be the namesake for Bloodied builds, you don't have to use it on a Bloodied build if you don't want to. But if you're looking for straight up the most damage that you can get out of a legendary effect, then Bloodied is one to go for. Depending on your health, it can boost your damage by up to 95%, and just because there's always a comment, no, 2-shot is not the best, it does not give you 100%, that got nerfed centuries ago, it only gives 25% increase. Bloodied also synergizes very well with certain perk cards, hence the creation of Bloodied builds, but that's also its limiting factor. If you're not Bloodied, then the effect is absolutely useless, so it does not have versatility like others do, but due to its damage and synergies and being a very popular build, it's definitely a top tier effect. Up next we have Quad, not a direct damage focused legendary effect, but more of a quality of life focused effect. Quad of course increases your weapon's magazine size substantially, so it's very effective on weapons that have small magazines or weapons that have excruciatingly slow reload times, as you avoid reloading as often. But really on anything, it's a great improvement. The fact that you don't have to worry about reloading as often and can just keep firing is a nice feature, particularly when faced with swarms of enemies or just a lot of enemies in a particular situation. Against bosses, it can increase your DPS because there's more time between reloads, so it may not give you a direct damage increase, but the fact that you have a larger magazine increases your damage output in a different way, because, well, when you're reloading, you're not damaging now, are you? It's also versatile, so it works on any build. Full health build, bloodied build, Quad easily slots in, no annoying requirements, it just does its thing. Anti-armor, a very effective legendary effect, and up there with Bloodied when it comes to performance. Bloodied and anti-armor are pretty much the top two dogs when it comes to damage output. Anti-armor ignores 50% of an enemy's armor. Shocking, I know, who would have thought? But this makes it extremely powerful, and it also stacks multiplicatively with other armor penetration perks like Stabilized or Tankular, etc. The reason why it's also extremely effective is that it's more versatile than Bloodied is. You can be full health and use anti-armor. You can be on a Bloodied build and use anti-armor. It will also perform the same for you without any annoying requirements or prerequisites to get going. Anti-armor just always has your back, so that's why it can be a much more valuable choice to you as you have flexibility with it. So definitely keep an eye out for anti-armor weapons. Vampires. Now this wasn't in particular a ranked list, just 5 of the best legendary effects that you should care about, but Vampires, I will actually say, is the best. Maybe shocking, but there's good reasons for that. Vampires of course heals you as long as you're dealing damage, so it's an easier requirement to beat. If you're in a fight, you're getting healing. Very much a quality of life legendary effect, but here's the beauty of Vampires. It's very versatile, very flexible, regardless if you're full health or bloodied or anything in between. Vampires will work for you. Against tough enemies, bosses, daily ops, mutated events, Vampires will help keep you alive. It also synergizes very well with bloodied builds, Like I said, just because you're bloodied, it doesn't mean you have to use a bloodied weapon. Due to all the benefit that you get from a bloodied build, the stat boosts, the damage boosts from the cards and mutations you run in, Vampires helps keep you alive, and all of those boost the weapon's damage for you. For new players, you don't have to worry about stim packs as much, it just gives you a super quality of life, carefree playstyle. Once you're used to it and swap to something else, you immediately realize just how much it was actually doing for you, and because most enemies in this game die pretty quickly, most of the time besides the bosses, it's overkill with any other effect anyway, so you might as well run quality of life effects like Vampires. The only situation where it's not ideal is very slow firing weapons, but anything with a decent fire rate or attack speed, you're golden. If you're looking for a way to absolutely solo anything in 76, then this is the video for you, but for now, thanks so much for watching, I'll see you in the next one.